Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And here at the very beginning of the show, I know Joy has got some interesting things that she wants to talk about, but just here at the beginning, I just wanted to bring up one thing. So at the moment in Anaheim, California, is the NAMM show. Now, are you familiar with NAMM?
Like Vietnam?
No.
No, so no, I'm not.
It stands for the National Association of Music Merchants. And this is the big trade show that happens every year. And this
okay. I know what you're talking about now. Yes, I do know what this is.
And this is where all of the musical instrument manufacturers and software people to do with the music industry release all their new products. So this is currently going on in California, in Anaheim. And a lot of people who I follow on various platforms, your Instagrams and your threads, because I'm all about the threads now. I'm very, very, very into threads. I tried Blue Sky for a while, and it was okay. There's a thriving music community on there, but I didn't fully connect. I still dip in to see what's going on, but I don't know. I've been embracing the threads, and a lot of people on the threads have been telling me they're going to NAMM this week.
Well, I will say I haven't been embracing the threads, as Tim's aware of. And our No Name Music Cast is on the threads now. And we've been getting followers and people commenting and writing back and forth. I think it's very fun if you guys would like to join us.
Yes, it's like the early days of Twitter. I do like it. So anyway, the NAMM show is going on. Lots of musical instrument manufacturers are releasing a lot of their stuff. I saw that my favorite brand of guitars, Music Man, are bringing out some guitars that I probably wouldn't buy because their prices have quadrupled since I bought my ones. And what was very interesting is that Yamaha are displaying a purple grand piano that was built for Prince. And it was built in 2016. And apparently it was the last instrument Prince played on stage.
I mean, that's a very Prince-esque thing to play on a purple piano, so that doesn't surprise me. Is it like a grandstand stand piano or like a stand-up?
No, it's a grand piano. And apparently it was the strings in the piano were formatted in a certain way because there's a certain sound that he was looking for. And I said it's very beautiful and it's very purple. Now, of course, there's a lot of other musical instruments and other such equipment that have been released at NAMM, and I'm not going to go into that. But I just want to make everyone aware that is happening right now. And if you're somebody who buys musical instruments or is interested in that kind of stuff, have a look on their website because every manufacturer has brought who knows all this stuff out.
It has nothing to do with Vietnam.
No, nothing. I think at the beginning of my sort of journey of being a musician, I think I used to read about it in guitar magazines, and I think I didn't really understand what NAMM was.
Well, I just thought because I'm from the South and my dad's a Vietnam veteran, and some of the older people would say Vietnam instead of Vietnam, which to be fair, it does make an A sound. So I get it. But that's when you said NAMM, that's all I could think of. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, not the National Association of Music Merchants.
Did not ring a bell, but I have seen articles and things posted about that. So I do kind of know what you're talking about, though I've never delved into it. Delved is the word.
Delve. I think that's the word you're looking for.
Whatever. I've never dived into it. There we go. So with that being said, I gave Tim a very weirdly specific thing to listen to today.
Yeah.
And he was probably like, why? I imagine. So with that being said, I fell down a rabbit hole of looking through songs that were written or writing credits to the Bee Gees, aka Barry and Martin, the Gibb brothers. So I was looking through a list, and there is an A to Z list. And most of the songs were just songs from the actual Bee Gees themselves or Andy Gibb or things of that nature. Weirdly enough, there was a lot of Barbra Streisand songs that were written by the Bee Gees. Did not know that. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of Celine Dion songs. And of course, Islands in the Stream, and then just some various other hits, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I was just Googling on my lunch break, doing the little things. And I noticed on the list, there was a song, and it's called I Need You by Paris Hilton.
Yeah, let me just go on record and say, I think that is the first time I've ever listened to a Paris Hilton song.
And of course, I've never heard the song either. Now, I did like the Stars Are Blind pop song she did in the early 2000s. Say what you want. It was kind of a pop hit that I enjoyed. You like what you like, you don't have to justify it. So, with that being said, I have never heard this. And this was apparently, I think, on the same album as that. I couldn't tell you. But I was like, the Gibbs brothers wrote a Paris Hilton song, and he had very much writing credits on it. Well, unbeknownst to me, when you press play on this song, and Tim will tell you this, it's because it's got the Grease thing in the background that did it. It's not because Barry Gibb wrote the song, it's because they're sampling the song from Grease. But it threw me for a loop when I first saw that.
Yeah. So yeah, when I was listening to it, I was like, I see what they did there with that.
Well, there was another one. Actually, there's two other ones. And this goes into the fact that their music is so great. So I didn't torture Tim by making him listen to. There was one with Beyonce and Jay-Z. Same deal. I noticed that there was writing credits on it to the Gibbs brothers. Well, once I clicked into it, I realized it's because they sampled their song. And then it was one dirty old word. It's Ghetto Supers. Ghetto Superstar. That song is also, and I didn't realize that song is a play on Islands in the Stream, Tim.
I've never heard that. I don't know if I want to hear that.
It goes, Ghetto Superstar, that is what we are, coming from above. Do you get it now? Islands in the stream, that is what we... I did not realize that until I fell down the rabbit hole today. And that's so, but moral of the story is me and Tim have talked very heavily about the Gibbs brothers. They're making so much money because their music just continues to be sampled in modern day pop music. And they will forever just make all this music. But it threw me for a loop when I read. I was like, Barry Gibb wrote a song for Paris Hilton. I don't know why, but anyway, so that song, though, yeah, Tim, you probably don't want to hear it, but you see what I'm saying, though. That's obviously Islands in the Stream. I have heard that song thousands upon thousands of times, and I have never once made the connection that it was Islands in the Stream. Not once.
Actually, do you know, as you're talking about that, I think I may have heard that song.
It was popular for a while.
Yeah, because, you know, as I said, there was a period of time when I was playing with the previous band and we was playing in like sort of a lot of nightclubs and stuff. And I honestly swear I've heard that because then when you said it's to the tune of Islands in the Stream, it just sort of flashed back all of a sudden.
Well, it's so obvious because like Ghetto Super Islands in the Stream. It's so obvious now that I know it. But not once had I made that connection till this day. But I just thought it was funny because I'm like, they're just going to continue to make music till they're not continuing to make music. They're going to continue to make money till the end of time because of all these songs sampling their music because it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, as we've said many times before, the music of the Bee Gees, the Brothers Gibb, is amazing, amazing music, especially when you get into the disco era. I think the pre-disco Bee Gees is kind of meh for me, but when you get into Saturday Night Fever and onwards, it's just like, goodness me, this is just music of an incredibly high quality. And it is so baked into the culture. And even things like you said, the Grease song, you know, that transcends generations. And even now, high school students are doing the music to Grease. It's become one of these things that's just baked into the culture for people. So it will always be there.
Well, and what's funny, though, is so you know my thing about the dancing bear that I can never find again?
Yes.
I had a revelation today while I was on this Bee Gees thing. The other song that bear danced to. So if anybody's keeping up with this and finds the dancing bear, it was Jive Talking.
Okay.
That was the other song I specifically remember that bear dancing to. Not that anybody else cares, but Jive Talking was on there. All right. So, with that being said, that was just my little introductory thing. Now, I do have a bit of music news that will lead us into the episode. This is an exciting episode for me because it's a band I personally love, and the interwebs brought me onto this. Did you know Creedence Clearwater Revival is now back in the Billboard Top 100? Actually, Top 10.
Didn't know that, but one thing I'm very aware of is that these music charts, to some degree now, are meaningless. Because,
it's really true.
Because it's not, you're not purchasing physical product. You're not purchasing a download. A lot of this stuff is on streams and it's on, playlists and all this kind of stuff. So it really could be that people are just into a song for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden it's in the Billboard chart or whatever.
So, with that being said, I kind of fell down that. I thought, was it on like some show that I'm not familiar with or something? You know what I'm talking about, Tim.
Yeah.
We've talked about that with some other shows. I couldn't find any evidence that it was, but it does not surprise me, the song. Now, I said top 10. Actually, it's top 25, top 50. So, number 24, and Tim's right. This is on streaming, specifically like the Spotify's and the iTunes and the hit clips, because those are obviously online.
Mini disc.
It is Have You Ever Seen the Rain? This week specifically, it is number 24 in the United States Billboard Top 50, whatever you want to call it. And I just thought that was super interesting. I am a huge CCR fan, have been, because, they play in all the CBSs, so it only makes sense.
Well, I mean, I know you're tuning in to Radio CBS every day.
We're never going to let me live that down. That becomes a drinking game for this. We're going to put someone in a coma. But with that being said, do not drink. My advice is do not drink every time me and Tim say CBS going forward. But with that being said, tonight's episode is the CCR episode. Yay! We haven't really talked very much about them, besides maybe John Fogerty and his chops on the side of his face. That is always in the hair. The hair always gets me. But I have been a CCR fan for years. My mom and dad were CCR fans. And I have a question for you, Tim. Before we get into what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of CCR. Mm-hmm. Then we're just going to pull up some songs and talk about them. What is CCR an American thing? Is it a universal thing? What do you think as far as being from the UK?
I think it's an American thing. Because I remember many, many years ago when Hannah and I were in our communicating via email and hadn't met phase. She was very excited because she was going to go and buy a CCR box set because she loves CCR too. And I seem to remember having to look that artist up because it was not an artist at the time I was familiar with.
I mean, they are an American rock band, and I feel like they're a staple. And I imagine you've played some CCR songs playing in cover bands in Southwest Virginia.
Absolutely.
Like, I can't imagine that's not a staple in cover band world. But I wondered if they were more of an American thing because they feel very, I don't know how to say this, but they feel American to me.
Yes.
And so someone who's not in America who loves CCR, don't take it that way. They just feel like something in America we would really enjoy. So with that being said, I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of CCR, just delve into the kind of background, and then me and Tim will just discuss the different songs and various things and somehow go off on a tangent about where caskets are supposed to fill. But anyway, so with that being said, Tim, this is the CCR sode. I don't know, that didn't work as well as I thought it would in my brain. So for those who don't know, CCR stands for Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yes.
It's commonly abbreviated as CCR. Some people simply call it Creedence. It's an American rock band that was formed in California. The band consists of lead vocalist, lead guitarist, and primary songwriter John Fogerty. His brother was a rhythm guitarist, Tom Fogerty. Bassist was Stu Cook, and drummer was Doug Clifford. The members have played together since 1959. First as the Blue Velvets and later as the Gollywogs, which I thought was very interesting. Before settling as Creedence Clearwater Revival in 1967, the band's most prolific and successful period was between 1969 and 1971, which, Tim, was mind-blowing for me because they've had so many top hits in America that it always blows my mind when we do these episodes and I realize they were really only prevalent for 3 years. It's crazy how much 3 years can make a band just skyrocket.
Yeah, well, you think of like the Beatles. I think wasn't the Beatles active for 6 years or 7 years or something like that?
That's what we said on that one episode. I'm pretty sure we discovered it was only 6 years. And you're like, but they had like 57 number one hits. Like, how is that possible?
Yeah, and 9 albums. They must have, back then things were different. People were knocking albums out 2 a year. I mean,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, now even an established artist, like an established artist who's out there performing and releasing albums. I know Foo Fighters, there you go. They maybe release an album every couple of years, maybe every 18 months at tops. But you think like the Beatles, they release like 3 albums in 1 year or something.
I have a theory on that though. I feel like it's because, and when I look at albums now versus like even when I was looking at the album credits for this episode, right? Because I was looking through songs and different things. Why is it every album has 74 people credited on every song, whereas it was just John Fogerty in
I know,
the 60s?
I know the answer to that.
It's crazy.
I know the answer. So the answer is a lot of contemporary pop music, which tends to be more kind of hip hop orientated than band orientated, is a lot of the loops they use, a lot of the samples they use, or beats, if you will, that they would maybe purchase a beat from a producer. So like a producer would provide them different beats or a different sample or something. So if they purchase those beats, or those beats are provided by a certain person, that person gets a production credit.
Yeah, and they have to put them on there. It's like these people can literally breathe on the album cover and their name is on the record, Tim, so they don't get sued.
Yeah, and also I think it's a courtesy thing. You know, you would purchase your beats or your loop, whoever, from a certain producer, and then you would credit them in the same way. If you're making a film, at the end of the film, if somebody is the catering assistant, if somebody is the I don't know, assistant to the dolly grip, or the person who's I don't know, assistant to the producer's assistant, that you see them listed out in the credits. And it's I think it's just an industry courtesy thing. And
I don't think it's bad, but I swear that because there's so much that goes into it and so many pieces now that are being pulled from different locations, that's why it takes so long to make an album.
Yeah, and then was a different time to some degree, where it was bands, predominantly bands, and you had an engineer and a producer, and that's really all you needed, really.
Yeah. You might have some people playing, you might have a studio band, but that's pretty much the extent of it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so moral of the story is it was mind-blowing to me that they literally were only successful between 1969 and 1971. They produced 14 consecutive top 10 singles during that time. Mm-hmm. Exactly what I was just saying. 5 consecutive top 10 albums, 2 of which, Green River and Cosmo's Factory, reached #1. The band performed at Woodstock in 1969 and was the first major act signed to appear there. So they were the first band that was signed to go to Woodstock. And then CCR disbanded in 1972 after 4 years of chart-topping success. Tom Fogerty had left the previous year. Mm-hmm. John Fogerty was at odds with the remaining band members over business, artistic control, all that stuff we always see. Lawsuits were amok. Fogerty had disagreements with Fantasy Records and the owner, and there were many court cases. John Fogerty refused to perform with the 2 surviving members of Creedence. In 1993, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Though the band has never publicly reunited, John Fogerty still continues to play CCR songs as part of his solo act. And Clifford and Cook, the 2 other members, because Tom Fogerty is no longer with us, the brother, perform as Creedence Clearwater Revisited from 1995 to 2010. They're still kind of known as like a staple rock radio classic hit in America, generally. And they're certified diamond, all that good stuff. So they are one of those bands that me and Tim have talked about. They refuse to play together, we'll never see each other unless blank freezes over type bands. They hate each other.
Yes.
Unless the money comes in, and then somehow they miraculously seem to play together again.
Now, wasn't there a period of time when John Fogerty wasn't allowed to perform Creedence songs?
Yes, there was like something with one of the legal cases where he was basically barred from playing them.
Yeah,
but he's back to doing it now.
Because I know that Premonition album that's in every thrift shop across the country, that was like his big comeback when he was allowed to perform Creedence songs again. And it was a huge thing at the time.
I mean, to be fair, I still I still hold a grudge against John Fogerty's solo career because of that stupid song center field, whatever the
Centerfield.
baseballs. So me and John Fogerty, I've not looked into it too far. I hate that song. Thank you, Kroger, for ruining that for the rest of my life.
Exactly. And one other thing I have for you, Joe, I don't know whether you're gonna come to this, but the origins of the name Creedence Clearwater Revival.
I kind of was, but I will let you say it, Tim.
So my understanding, and you can correct me from your research, is that it was on a church sign.
Yes. That's basically what they said is it was on a church sign. They were driving past it because they went through the names of the blue, whatever I said a minute ago, and then the pollywogs or gollywogs. And they were driving past the church. The two brothers were, and they saw it and they liked it.
Yeah,
That was it.
a revival service is something that would happen at a church, and
Yep.
I think the church was Creedence Clearwater
Yep. And this was their
Evangelistic Church or
revival.
something like that, and it was Creedence Clearwater Revival 7 p.m.
You are correct, Tim. That's exactly what I read. And I mean, it makes sense once you hear it, but it is a really long name. So I understand why we abbreviate it as CCR.
Correct.
So, with that being said, I'm just going to go through probably some songs that you're very familiar with, some songs you're not familiar with. I'm sure Tim will have some things to say. He's probably very familiar with this band because I imagine it is a staple with everybody who's ever played in Southwest Virginia.
Yes, there's a number of CCR songs I've played. There's a couple of CCR songs I wish I'd never have to play ever again.
I mean, that is fair. And there is an on-running joke, speaking of Vietnam. There are two or three. If it is a Vietnam movie and it doesn't have a CCR song in it, it's not a Vietnam movie.
No, I believe legally it needs that.
It has to have something to insinuate there's bad things coming.
Yes.
So, with that being said, I'm going to start by one that probably is one of the ones Tim wants to stab himself in the eye when he plays, because this is one of the very first songs I learned on my ukulele because it's extremely easy and even people who can play three chords can play, and that's Looking Out My Back Door.
Yes, it's not a song that I've actually performed in cover bands, at least not yet. But I'm not completely burnt out on this song. If I heard it right now, I wouldn't skip it or try and listen to something else. But it's in that sort of territory where, again, is so ingrained in the US culture.
It really is. And so it's very easy. I don't even remember what the chord progression is, but it's very simple. Do, do, do. It's very like, Tim will probably look it up and tell us. He's probably giving it a goog. But it was one of their most well-known songs. You probably all heard it. It's pretty simple for anyone to play. It was on the album Cosmo's Factory in 1970 and basically became one of their instant number one hits. And I have a theory that CCR, at least in America, are making bank of the amount of movies that have their songs in it because they have this thing where even if the song is negative, it still sounds happy. Like they have this ability to make like upbeat sounds to give you kind of, and you know, in movies, they're always kind of playing that out. Like they're trying to give you an idea of what's going on and they want it to sound happy when something negative is happening or whatever to give you that justification. I feel like CCR is probably making bank off those movies.
I would imagine so. I mean, they could be one of these artists that really at this point is living off their royalty credits.
I wouldn't be surprised, especially considering they hate each other. I mean, if you're not going to play together, you might as well be making money.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably some business dealings which bring them together, but if there's money involved.
So for those who were wondering, let's see, I did look it up. It's been a while since I played it, but it's CECGD. Like it's pretty easy, Tim. It's in the key of G. Just got home from ill. It has the same rhythm throughout, so like basic strumming is pretty easy.
Yeah.
That's my advice if you're trying to learn to play the ukulele. This is a great one, guys. It's also just a fun song in general. All right. So we'll go with what we talked about earlier, and that song is Have You Seen the Rain?
Yes. Again, not a song that I've performed. I don't know. I actually quite like this song. I think this wouldn't even be a skip for me.
I absolutely love this song. And so the history of this song is it is one of their most popular songs. It so for those, if I don't say anything else, you guys can generally assume all of these songs were written by John Fogerty. He
Hmm.
wrote probably 85% of the music, is singing on 90% of it. There's very few songs that CCR performed that wasn't written by them. Written by him specifically, like he solo written. This was released in 1970 on the album Pendulum. And actually, I did find out this song, Tim, though, the song is, have you ever seen the rain? It's very kind of melancholy. It is about John's despair of CCR approaching their impending breakup.
Very self reflective song then.
Yeah, he said many people assumed, as me and Tim were just saying, that the song's about the Vietnam War, which it could be like that, but he said it was actually just him talking about the sadness of the band breaking up.
Yeah, well, there we are. A very introspective song written by Mr. Fogerty. That's
Have
another thing,
you?
actually.
Go
In
ahead.
England, I would say Fogerty. Here, it's Fogerty.
I wonder. Well, I mean, fog. We would say fog, but fogger. I guess it's the GER that we just enunciate differently. Enunciate.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember when I used to watch Letterman when I lived in England, because they used to just, the Letterman episodes used to miraculously appear on my computer. I think he
Hmm.
had John Fogerty on there, and I was surprised to hear him say Fogerty, not Fogerty.
Well, I think for me as an American, fogger is like two. It's like two different sounds for the G because you've got fog and then you've got ger t. Whereas we do faux, just like the FO ger t. Does that make sense? Because there's not two G's in it. I don't know why. Like in my brain, if I were going to say fogger t, there would be two G's in it.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe for our listeners around the world who speak in English, are you team Fogerty or Fogerty?
Now here's the real question, Tim. Are you Appalachia or Appalachian?
I, I'd say
You live
Appalachian.
here now, Tim, but
Yeah,
you know.
I'd probably be Appalachian. That's the way that I would go with that.
But you live here and you know what we say.
No, I know.
For those who don't know, it is a big Southwest Virginia. Well, not Southwest Virginia. Just everybody who lives in the Appalachian Mountains. We don't say Appalachian. We say Appalachian.
That's true. Also, on a similar thing, taco or taco.
Taco.
I say taco.
We'll be here all week. The amount of times Tim said something up like that's not how I would say it, but moving along. Eh, tomato, tomato. Please say you don't say tomato.
If I'm in a, I don't know. See, the thing is, I went through a period of time adapting. So when I was first here, I would go into a Subway and I'd ask for tomato because I'm trying to adapt to my surroundings. I'm trying to blend in. I'm trying not to be,
Fair.
rock the boat too much, as it were. But I've lived here for so long and I feel very comfortable now with my surroundings. There's two things I do. One, exclusively use British English spellings in business emails for my own entertainment. I had to write the word center for a place in the organization that I work for. It's a something something center. And I
Yeah.
had to send it to someone reasonably senior today. And I spelt it CENTRE in the subject line for my own entertainment. So that's one thing I do. And secondly, I think at this point, if I was to go into a Subway and order, which I wouldn't because I'd order it on the app and collect it, but that's beside the point. But if I went in to order it, I would probably say tomato again for my own entertainment.
I knew you were going to say that, and I knew you had some sense of cheekiness like that because I've been around you enough to see it play out. Well, the other thing is Tim's trying to. It's kind of like with me, where I used to speak French almost fluently, and then I lost some of it because I don't use it at all. In
Mhm.
some way, I feel like you're trying to keep some of your British roots.
I mean, to some degree, but I mean, it's not so much British roots. It's just I just want to be me,
I mean, that's fair. Yogurt.
Joy, it's yogurt. I don't know where yogurt comes from. It's yogurt.
There's no A. It's Y-O. All right. Moving back to the music. So we're going to go back in time and we're going to do this song has been covered. Most people prefer the cover. And I think, though, generally most people know the original was by CCR. Tim probably knows where this is going. This is Proud Mary.
Yes. This is a song I've played many times in cover bands. I don't think I've played it since I've lived here, but certainly in England we used to play. Used to play in a band called The Guilty Party, and I think we played it in Moroccan Soul as well. Maybe not a super staple of bands in the UK, cover bands in the UK, but certainly something I've come across many, many times.
So this came out in January of 1969. It was on the studio album Bayou Country. And it peaked as number 2 in the US 100 and number 1 in the UK 100. Now, here's a question I've never paid close enough attention to, and I'm sure I could pull the sheet music and look at it, but is there any, have you ever noticed it, playing wise, is there a difference in the Ike and Tina Turner version, or are they generally the same song? Chord-wise, I've never paid attention enough to know.
They're basically identical. The Ike and Tina Turner one goes at 1,000,000 miles an hour. That is the difference. That's just driving, bam, 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 bam. The CCR version is a lot more laid back. Now, when I played it in the Guilty Party, it was more Ike and Tina Turner than it was a CCR.
That makes sense. I mean, it does sound, I prefer the Ike and Tina Turner version. I mean, I like the CCR version. They are the originals, but there's just something so powerful about Tina Turner, I think, that just sells it. And even when I was doing research on the CCR, says it's almost like we wrote the song for them. Like they know that version is better. Me and Tim have talked about other artists who've admitted that. It's fine. Now, for those who don't know, the Proud Mary was formerly known as Mary Elizabeth, was a real ship based in Memphis, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. It traveled around the Mississippi River from 1928 to 1978. And that's pretty much what it was based off of. They said, Fogerty explained it this way. He says, it is a seamless mix of black and white roots in music. He liked Beethoven's Fifth Sympathy. Yes, Joy, sympathetic symphony, and wanted to open a song with a simral. Okay, I quit talking, everybody. With this, with the same intro.
Similar. You're looking for the word similar.
I debated words with Tip for so long I can't speak, implying the way Proud Mary opens with the repeated C chord to A, which it does, is based off of Beethoven. I thought that was super interesting because I would have never made that analogy.
No, I would have never made that at all.
To be fair, it's not like I'm listening to Beethoven that often.
No, I'm thinking that I'm doing our 1001 album challenge, which I'm doing with our listener Megan, and I'm also doing with my boss from work. It's a cross world collaboration where all of us are listening to the same music and then talking about it, which is super interesting. I'm thinking when I finish that, I'm thinking of maybe potentially trying to get involved in some classical stuff purely because I have no knowledge of it.
So when I was in high school and then when I went to college, I sang in a choir in college. We've talked about this. This was an audition choir. It was more advanced choir. And do you know what the hardest... And I can actually send, and actually make a note of this, Tim. There's a YouTube video of the choir I was in singing this on stage. I could find it. It exists. Hayden, in the time of war, was the hardest piece of music I have ever looked at, breathed at, or even thought about. And it went on forever. Mm-hmm. And I can honestly say I did not enjoy any of that at all. But for what it's worth, the fact that I have that knowledge and I was able to do it and learn from it, it was super important. So I would say anybody dive into it a little bit because it is very interesting and you'll find different things in it that you didn't even realize are engraved in the music you hear today that you don't even pick. You know what I mean, Tim? I think it's worth your while.
Yeah, I think I may do that. I mean, I don't know if I currently have the capacity with the
Yeah.
amount of listening. I mean, I listen to so much music, but I don't know whether I have enough time in the day to absorb another extra hour of different music outside of all the other stuff I listen to.
I mean, I think that's fair. I will say though, I would, if you have the time, I would say do it. Moral story. Because I learned a lot from it. The other piece of music that I was in or show I was in that I think developed me as far as like music skill, Cats the musical, because Andrew Lloyd Webber writes music like crazy. Like I don't know how much you've listened to Cats the musical, but I'm sure you've heard Phantom of the Opera. You've heard a lot of his
Of
music in
course.
your time.
Of course.
The most difficult arrangement. So there's like this one song that's called like Jellicle Cats. And this is where I struggled. It wasn't with the singing, it was the timing because the words would not match the timing of the song. Does that make sense, Tim? Like you just have to know when you're gonna say it.
Yeah.
And there'd be like little parts because I would only have different parts in the song because I was Jenny Indian, where I had to pop up and say it. And like there's nothing to indicate when it's coming. You just had to know instinctively.
Yes.
And it's hard. Like it was straight up hard. That was one of the hardest pieces of music, period. Now I love it and I sing it like, and I have it memorized in my brain forever. But that one was pretty hard. And he took a lot of his inspiration from exactly what we were just talking about, classical music.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to Creedence Clearwater Revival, and apparently John Fogerty really liked Beethoven, if anybody was wondering. With that being said, the next one is a song by an artist we've talked about in another episode, but the CCR version is probably one of the more famous versions. This is I Put a Spell on You by Screaming Jay Hawkins, which we talked about in the rock episode. But CCR does a version of it. Are you familiar with their version, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, Screaming Jay Hawkins is the one that probably most people would know. And this is a song, certainly the Screaming Jay version is one of those songs that always comes up around Halloween because whenever you look at like the top 20 best Halloween songs, that always comes up. And I'm sure if you have the Spotify around Halloween, that's going to be one of those songs that's always there. I've heard the CCR version of it, but if I really wanted to scratch that itch for that song, it's probably going to be the Screaming Jay Hawkins one is the one I'm going to seek out.
I agree with you because his version is just, he has a very soulful S to him, whereas the CCR version is much more Southwest Virginia kind of country style rock, Southern rock, I guess is what it's called. But I do like their version, and I think it's cool. So I just wanted to bring it up. And also I just wanted to bring up Screaming Jay Hawkins because we talked about it before. I did find it very interesting that their version is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 500 songs that shaped rock and roll, but his version isn't. I did not think that was fair.
And I take it, is it his song or is it their song?
It's his song. He wrote it. This is one they did a cover of.
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, certainly as iconic as his version is, yeah, that's odd. If they wrote it, I could maybe see where they were coming from.
Yeah,
But because they produced a cover of it, I don't know. That would be like, I don't know, Little Help from My Friends. The not the original version being, I don't know, that'd be weird.
I know. And that's why I brought this up because I thought that was very strange. And if anyone has any contacts with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, me and Tim want to talk to them. Tim had some other personal things he wants to bring up, but I just want to bring this up.
I mean, I've been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 2 or 3 times. I mean, next time we go to Canada, I think I'm going to actually do a pit stop in Cleveland at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I think that's a good idea, Tim. You need to knock on some managers' doors. We have questions. Who, what, where, when, how? Who's behind all of this?
Well, I think there's a panel at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame who decides this stuff. I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland is a museum, basically.
Yeah.
And there's so much rock memorabilia in there. They have the canopy from CBGB's in there, guitars and outfits and cars and all kinds of stuff. And they rotate the exhibits around. I don't know whether the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have an administration office there. I don't know if they have like people sitting around a big table as we speak, discussing this stuff. I
What do you
honestly
mean,
don't.
Tim?
I don't know if they have a boardroom or anything. I really don't know how it works down there. I think it's just a museum tourist trap at this point. But I
I'm
don't.
sure it is. Oh, Tim, you guys can't see this, but Tim, do you see this horrible bruise right here?
Oh no.
Compared to my other hand, do you see it?
I do see that. What happened?
I hit the table today.
Oh no.
Injury, everybody. I didn't realize it until we're sitting here, and I just showed him this terrible bruise on the side of my hand. It really does hurt. Anyways,
Well, I've my hand. You can't see them, but I've got several cuts on my hand because at the weekend I installed a new ceiling fan light in our bathroom. Which, if the ceiling fan light was sitting in front of me at this desk with the wiring and putting the two screws in, it would take me around 30 minutes. Of course, when you're in the loft putting it in at a funny angle, you can't put any weight on the ceiling because you'd put your foot through it. So I had a guitar case balancing across two of the beams. I'm laying across this guitar case and then trying to wire three wires in and reassemble this fan and get it in a position and screw into beams. It took me about 3 hours and I got blood dripping off my fingers and scratches. I get out of there. Every bone in my body is aching.
you can see all the sweat dripping down his brow, like every vein is popping out.
Well, actually, I didn't sweat because I chose the perfect day to do it. It was freezing cold outside. It was below freezing outside. So when I went up in the loft, it was, no one said it was the same temperature, but it was certainly very, very cold up there.
Smart of you.
And it was the perfect time to do it.
I mean, that's smart of you. So, for those who listened to our episode where Tim talked about how cold it was, we're finally out of our cold snap, and now we went to spring weather, which is weird. But so we had these like a week of on and off again snow, ice, grossness, right?
Yeah.
So now everything is all muddy. So with that being said, you guys talk about me. Day before yesterday, my husband Charles was walking the dog, got his foot, Tim, stuck in mud, and guess who fell and hurt his shoulder?
Oh, no.
So when Charlie was born, he broke his collarbone, I guess, or something like coming out of his mom, like when he was born or whatever. And so his shoulder will dislocate really easily. Like I mean, I've been with Charlie, and he's probably dislocated his shoulder like 6 times since we've been married. Like it just happens.
Wow.
So he had the dog. The dog wants to go one way. He's going the other as he's falling to the ground and dislocated his shoulder. Had to pop it back in place. So now going on 3 days, I've had to hear nonstop whining about his shoulder hurting.
Oh, no.
Yeah, things are going well, everybody. Things are going well. All right. Well, back to CCR. Don't know how we got here, but I'm definitely going to say this is one that Tim never wants to hear again. And this is Fortunate Son.
Yeah, this song is a staple of I don't even say staple of the radio. It's a staple of US culture.
It really is.
And it's any Vietnam era film, TV show, or otherwise, this song gets played. And it's just such a overplayed song at this point, I feel.
So I think there's a few things in it. So Willie and the Poor Boy is the album in 1969. And, it says Willie and the Poor Boy in the song. Well, maybe that's looking out my back door. But anyway, so with that being said, it's became very synonymous with anti-war movement anthems or any expression of like counterculture. This song is played. And the reason it was, though, is it did come out during Vietnam. So it was 1969. And it was peak U.S. involvement in Vietnam, though John Fogerty does say it's not explicitly about criticism of the war in that sense, but what it is about the draft. So what it's talking about is some people were fortunate sons and some weren't, like the ones who could get out of getting into the draft. And I come from, and maybe this is why I'm a big CCR fan. My father was in Vietnam. He was a POW. He was, shot down and was taken at siege, was found in a German hospital. Like my family's got some crazy history. So maybe it's very, it means a lot to me for that. But what it's talking about is it's talking about, Some people are fortunate born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I wasn't one of them.
Hmm.
So I think that is a very kind of ingrained America for those who don't live here. And this is, I think Tim would agree with you. We're all about the underdog. We always have been. I don't, for good or bad, that's who we are.
Yeah.
And take it with a grain of salt. I mean, sometimes that's good. Sometimes the pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing feels almost ridiculous, but it is what it is. So it makes sense that this song is integrated in our history.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. And I think it was used. So Fortunate Son wasn't really inspired by any one event. Basically, they're just saying that it was a bunch of events where John Fogerty and people saw privileged people getting out of the same situations that people weren't as privileged were. And it was instantly receptive. But think about during that time, the people who were listening to his music are probably people who were worried about being drafted tomorrow. So, of course, the song would speak to them.
Sure.
Think about it. I mean, if you were worried about being drafted tomorrow and you're not one of these fortunate sons, it makes sense.
Yeah, because I think the draft was done on some kind of birthday lottery or something like that.
Yeah. It literally would show. So in America, I know that it's called something different in the UK.
Conscription.
Conscription. But in America, they actually, so you had like a number, like you had a draft card with a number on it, and they would televise it. They would literally pull up what looks like a bingo machine. You know what I'm talking about, Tim? And then pull out a certain set of numbers. And if you fell into that category based off your birthday or whatever the number on your draft card was, then you were drafted. And then from there, there were certain physical requirements, certain mental things you had to meet. And then it was in America between 18 and 25, 26 maybe, you have to register for the draft. After 26, you no longer have to register, but technically up till 35, if there were like a World War III or something, you could. But usually it's generally people between 18 and 25. And the reason I know this so much right now is what Tim said, the UK calls it consignment, whatever you said.
Conscription.
Apparently, they're worried about World War III right now in the UK, and it came up in national news about them threatening to bring back the conscription because of all the stuff in Russia. So there you go. That's why I knew that.
Yeah, I think it was some general or something was making some comments at a dinner or something, and of course, tabloid newspapers blew it completely out of proportion. I mean, you can't speak to what's going to happen down the line, but my understanding is there's no plans for that right now, but I mean, you can't speak to the future.
But moral story was because I saw that headline, Tim, I fell down the rabbit hole earlier, and that's the only reason I knew all those off the top of my head. I'm not an expert on the draft, everybody. It was just conveniently timed. And I thought it was interesting. Is conscription a word that you use in the UK for anything else? Like, I've never heard that before.
No, I think it refers to the draft, or
that's
as
the
you would
only
say
thing
here.
It means. Okay. I was just like, conscription? It's just very interesting. Do you have to register for it, like the draft in America? Like,
no.
How does that work in the UK? No.
There used to be many, many years ago, they had national service. So you had to, at a certain age, you had to be in the military for a year or a couple of years. And in times of war, you had to go. But they made the military in the UK all volunteer, years ago in the 50s or something like that. And it's been all volunteer ever since.
To be clear, in America, it is volunteer. But when you go to like the DMV and you get your driver's license, for those who don't know what me and Tim are talking about, you have to sign up for what's known as selective service. Basically, that's if for some weird reason we were to end up in World War III tomorrow, they would have you on record as a possibility that they could pull to put into the draft.
Yeah, when I became a green card holder, I had to sign up. Well, actually, I didn't have to sign up because I was already too old for that.
I think if you were within the age range, you would have been.
Yeah, I think it ends at 35 or something like that.
So I've never talked about this live on air, but I'll talk it up. My father is one of the few people you will know who chose to go into the Vietnam War. He was not drafted, and he may have been under the age of 18, and they may have let him in anyway. Yeah. Dad had a pretty bad home life, and it's pretty bad when going to Vietnam was your option. So he chose it. He left. he was my dad is 6'4" and very large, so he looked much older than he was, and they weren't really checking records back then, Tim. They slapped some boots on him and told him to go.
Yeah, and, and some people want to be in the military. They want to, be, defend the country and be part of all that kind of stuff and have great military careers. I mean, some people want to do that.
So with that being said, this would not be a CCR episode if we didn't spend at least a good 10 minutes talking about the military. And me and Tim are obviously draft experts, but let's go back to the other song that's played in every Vietnam movie ever, and that is Bad Moon Horizon.
Yeah, I've played this before in bands.
1969, April, right in the heart of Vietnam. And I mean, I guess if you were walking through a jungle waiting for the Viet Cong to come out you, it would feel like a bad moon was rising, Tim.
Absolutely.
Once again, this was written by John Fogerty. It's a single from their album Green River, was released in 1969, April 16th, 4 months before the album. It peaked at number 2 in the US, and actually it reached number 1 in the UK singles. So this song actually was higher in the UK than it was in America, Tim.
I didn't know that. As I said, that surprises me because I see this as pretty much a US act rather than a UK act.
I thought it was interesting too. That just stood out to me. Now, what I did not realize, and I guess I've never kind of went down this rabbit hole, but it says it's been recorded by at least 20 artists, ranging in styles from folk to reggae to psychedelic rock. I've never really heard another version.
I can't say as I have, but that doesn't surprise me. It's, again, a song that's so deep in the culture, I can see that people would want to cover that.
Yeah, and the thing about it is it's probably like they did a version of it for a movie. You know what I mean, Tim? And you didn't really hear it outside of the movie or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, it's described as being loaded with rhythm and drive, which I would agree with. I don't really know. It's got like that kind of loud, bold, like intenseness about it, I think. Kind of like Proud Mary in that sense. It is known as there's like this guy, he's like a rock critic. I've seen his name a few times, as Clifford Jr. Mm-hmm. And when he's talking about this is the 5th greatest song in rock history or whatever is what he claims. But with that being said, I would say, going along with what we were just saying, this one is probably an American ingrained culture staple for us.
Absolutely. I would agree with that.
Also, it's probably used in every movie ever, not even just with Vietnam, anytime anything bad is happening. So once again, CCR is probably right on the money when it comes to making money. Like, honestly, like, I just think about it and I have to wonder what the royalties look like. Like, it has to be really high. I feel like that's really the way too, Tim. We talked about, like different ways to make money. Royalties have to be the way. Like, if your song just gets ingrained in culture and used for everything, that has to be the way to make long-standing money. It does.
Yeah, I think that sort of TV and film royalties are probably the only way people are making money in the music industry these days. Nobody's really making any money on physical media. Nobody's really making any money on streaming or anything. I think it has to be those kind of things where things are licensed to commercials, or they're licensed to a film, or licensed to a TV show of some description. That is where the money comes from.
It has to be, because they're honestly, I mean, we and Tim have talked about this, but musicians aren't making that much money anymore. They have to do 1,000 other things to make money.
I think to some degree that's always been the case. I mean, the music industry is one of those professions where you have incredibly talented people that are not properly rewarded for what they do. I mean, of course, you have your Elton Johns, you have your Queens, you have your Pink Floyds, etc. Your multi
one in a million.
Yeah, but there's probably several hundred of those, but there's millions of musicians out there who are playing gigs like me, or gigs that are better than that, or even gigs at a level below that, who are very talented people who are working very hard and playing every weekend and making music at home. And maybe they're even getting recognition, but the money isn't really there. I don't think it's ever really been there. But certainly now people are more aware that the various mechanisms for people's music output is there's no money being coming from it.
I can agree with that. And I think that but I think now they have more of outlets, I guess. Like back in the day, I imagine most of the music came, like your concerts were a big money profit, going on like shows like Bandstand or Top of the Pops or whatever, where you were making your profit and things of that nature. But now it's like they have to sell fragrances. They have their own this line, they have their own that line. You know what I mean, Tim? Like there's just so many other outlets they have to do to keep up with it. And their music is almost just like a way to keep their brand alive.
Yeah,
Better or worse.
It used to be you used to tour almost at a loss because people would buy your records. And now it's the other way around, where the records or, the music, whether it's streaming CDs, records or whatever, is the promotional piece. And then the money is made from touring. And that is why the concert tickets are so expensive, because the whole mechanism of the music industry flipped the other way.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense to me, though. I hadn't really thought about it till you said it, but yeah. So the next song I'm going to talk about is not written by John Fogerty. It is a cover they did, but I wanted to bring it up because I find this as a song that I still think Tim kind of talks about ingrained in American culture. This is Susie Q. Now, this is not their song. It was originally, I don't remember the guy's name. I'll look it up real quick. But there was a guy in the 50s who did the original version. I think the Rolling Stones have done a version. The Trashmen did a version. There's a few other versions. But I particularly like Susie Q. I think Dale Hawkins, that's the guy's name, just reminded me, was released in 1957. You've heard this song. Yes, Tim?
Oh,
Susie Q?
Of course.
It is a very rockabilly song. It fits the 1950 thing, but I can talk from my perspective. When I was in high school, this is the only reason I want to bring this up, was it almost feels like, kind of like an Elvis song for those who don't know the song. There was a movie in high school called Susie Q, when I was in high school, called Susie Q, and they never say the song in the movie. But it definitely was based on the song because of what the movie. So it was a Disney Channel original movie, like where they did their own little movies. And I remember this. She was dressed in like a 1950s outfit. She died like in the song and everything. And I distinctly remember, but they never once mentioned the song. And it used to drive me insane. It's like they knew what they were talking about, but they couldn't say it, or maybe they didn't have the royalty to the song or whatever. I don't know how it worked, but it used to drive me insane.
Oh yeah, I'd imagine they didn't want to pay for the publishing to mention it or something. I don't know.
But if you guys know what I'm talking about, there was a girl, and it was like a modern like high school, and they had like a girl that was a ghost that was haunting them named Susie Q, and she was wearing like a poodle skirt, and like all the emphasis was about like the song, but they never said it in the movie, and it used to drive me insane. And for a while, I thought I made that whole thing up, but then I went down to Google to find that I didn't. But yeah, it was never really talked about. So moral of the story is if you guys watched that movie. And I thought it was funny, Susie Quattro, she did a version of it as well, because of course she did.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't she? I mean, she's an artist I feel got a lot more recognition in the UK than she ever did in the United States. And I believe she lives in the UK, and she was in Happy Days. She's a singer-songwriter, amazing bass player, and I think she got her recognition in the UK.
I think so too, which is the ironic part is she was born in America, though.
Oh, absolutely.
She's American.
Yes.
But for some reason, she just did. But it's kind of like we talked about. There's a few UK artists who say they made their mark in America before they were popular in the UK. It just happens that way sometimes.
Sometimes it does.
Well, I mean, I don't control, but yes, I just thought it was funny she did a version of it too. I always wondered if that's her. Do you know if that's her real name?
I don't know, but we have a whole internet in front of us, Joy. Whether it's
all right, Susie Quattro. Here we go. I'm going to look at this page that rhymes with encyclopedia.
Susan K. Quattro.
Yeah, I mean, Susan K. Quattro.
I mean, that's her real name, and that is a great stage name as well.
Yeah, she was born as naturally with a great name.
Yeah.
So I was correct. She's from Detroit, Michigan, born in 1950. I mean, I think she was popular here, but she's not a household name. But I feel like if you told somebody, like, in the UK, Susie Quattro, Dance with the Devil or something, they would know. But in America, I don't think they would.
No, I really don't think. I mean, the podcast I listen to, Rock Solid, they've had Susie Quattro on a number of times, and the host, Pat Francis, has built a really big relationship with Susie Quattro doing these various interviews. But I get the sense that she's just not known here.
It is what it is. So, with that being said, Tim, do we have time for like one or two more songs? I don't know where we're at.
Let's do one more. Pick out the best one of the two you have.
All right. Well, I'm just going to pick the one that my eyes went to, and that's Up Around the Bend, which is also, I would say, it was written by John Fogerty, very much a staple. It was on Cosmo's Factory. It was released with the single Run with Through the Jungle, which, if you've heard that, also another song that sounds like it was written about Vietnam. It did well in the United States, came out in 1970, and it actually reached number 3 in the UK singles charts too, Tim. So there was some in the 70s, some love of CCR. I just don't think that. I wonder if in the time they were popular, but they're just not like a staple that they are in America and great. Does that make sense? Like maybe there were hits that came from them that were popular, but you're like, it's not like an Elvis or a, you know what I mean, the Jackson 5 or something where we still talk about them regularly.
Yeah, the one, I don't know if it was actually John Fogerty by himself or whether it was CCR, but the one that comes to mind like that is Rocking All Over the World. That was
that's a single.
Yeah, I think that's a John Fogerty original song, not a CCR song. But like in the UK, everybody knows that as a Status Quo song. But here, everyone knows it as a John Fogerty song.
I remember we talked about that. It's kind of interesting. So, and for those who don't know, John Fogerty was drafted for service in Vietnam. The same day he received the notice, he went to a local U.S. recruiter who signed him up immediately for training. And that's, I think, why he's so like kind of synonymous with it, because he was in the Army Reserves. He did training at Fort Bragg, which is in South, Fort Knox, Fort Lee, and then served as a part-time reservist until being dismissed at 6. So he was drafted, but then he chose to go into the reserves himself. And so I think it's almost like, you know, like Elvis kind of has that thing because he chose to go in the military too, and they didn't really have to. So I think that's part of the reason why he's so synonymous with this. I mean, Up Around the Bend is a great song. I also learned that version, and that song was covered by Elton John. I don't know if you've ever heard Elton John's version, but he has a version of Up Around the Bend.
No, I've never heard that.
Well, I'm going to have to send it to Tim and maybe post that on the list, and we'll put it on the Facebook page because it definitely exists. I've heard it 1,000 times. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, just classic CCR, Tim.
Yeah, I would just like to give a shout out to the song Green River.
That's on my list too.
Yeah, which is a song I've played in a number of cover bands since I've lived here. And I'd be happy never ever to hear it again and never ever play it again.
I kind of thought that was on yours because the album is also called Green River.
Yes.
And that's a single from the album. So that's why I didn't bring it up. That's the same one that the B-side has Bad Mood Rising on.
Yes.
There you go, guys. Well, Tim, what would you like to tell the people before we go?
Just be extra kind this week to almost everybody you meet.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.